President George Bush's decision to invade Iraq was a politically contemptuous decision made after over a year and a half of daily articles and TV broadcasts leading up to invasion. The coverage was unprecedented at the time for a war. Bodies of work and research have since claimed that despite its high volume, this coverage was a failure due to the fact that 1. Journalists were unable to convince the overall public of the fact that Saddam Hussein did not possess nuclear arms, and 2. Many citizens still believed upon invasion that Hussein helped the terrorists carry out the 9/11 attacks. Bush admitted afterwards that he hadn't. Media coverage was primarily supplied by elite newspapers that could afford to embed reporters with the military, such as the AP and Washington Post, and dispersed by non-elite newspapers that dispersed news to rural and county citizens, such as the Columbia Daily Tribune and the Columbia Missourian. In the case of the Missourian, from the attacks on September 11, 2001 until the March 20, 2003 invasion, over a year and a half, 130 invasion-related articles were published by actual Missourian staff. 24 of the articles were written by Stuart Laurie, the global journalist, columnist, and former vice president of CNN, who frequently conducted interviews with journalists, often foreign, from the elite newspapers. One example of these reporters is Barbara Slavin, the former senior diplomatic reporter for USA Today. 42 of these articles were opinion articles from local Columbia citizens. 36 of the articles were against invasion, 2 were undecided, and 4 were in support of the war. This left 72 actual news articles from the Columbia Missourian on the invasion into Iraq. These articles centered around local protests against the war and how the war affected the local community, for example, how fluctuations in fuel costs affected local delivery companies. These 83 articles do not account for the almost daily wire coverage in the months generally after May 2002 leading up to invasion. The Columbia Missourian regularly featured articles and opinion columns from the Washington Post and LA Times, but most frequently published AP Wire articles. These were sourced mainly from AP bureaus on the coast and were generally episodically framed around President Bush's actions and statements regarding invasion. The Columbia Daily Tribune was fairly similar to the Columbia Missourian in regard to its local coverage of the invasion. In the year and a half leading up to the war, the Tribune published 1,394 articles about the invasion of Iraq. 904 of these articles were wire stories, 217 were opinion pieces from local citizens, and 78 were actual news articles from the Columbia Missourian on the invasion. Like the Missourian, most Tribune articles discussed the opinions of local community members and politicians on the war, how an invasion could affect local citizens and community activism, both for and against the war. The local campus newspaper published 7 opinion articles about the war in the year and a half leading up to invasion, and all were against. Although the invasion only lasted a month, U.S. soldiers are still fighting the war in Iraq.